Hello, class. I wanted to talk to you for a little bit about where we are in the semester, where we've been and where we're going, how you guys are doing. I think you guys are doing fantastic. You don't seem to be having any trouble navigating the blackboard. You don't seem to have any trouble accessing the books. So I'm generally very happy about that. If you do have trouble somewhere along the line, please just let me know and we'll figure out a solution. I want to start with wrapping up The Heretic's Daughter. I hope you enjoyed the book as much as I did. I think it's wonderful for giving you a sense of the time period and a sense of what it was like to be someone who was accused of witchcraft, and you basically had no real recourse. You certainly weren't represented professionally by any sort of attorneys. You were just judged very harshly, as you saw. But what I really want to talk to you is, nobody responded to my post on the discussion board about my favorite character in the book, which is Sarah's cousin Margaret. Margaret really intrigues me. Now, this is going to be a plot spoiler because by now you should have all finished reading The Heretic's Daughter, so I'm not going to worry about that. At the end of the book, we learn that Margaret was taken by Indians. But we also know, from what we sit here in the 21st century, we also know that Margaret is schizophrenic, okay? She hears voices. She sees things that aren't there. She hears voices. I mean, she's a textbook case of schizophrenia. Back then, of course, they didn't know that. And really the only person who acknowledges that in the book is Sarah, you know, when she says that Margaret told her that the little people who live in the cabinet told her to take care of the Quaker, you know, that kind of stuff. But Margaret does strike me as one of the more interesting characters in the book. And at the end of the book, when she is taken by Indians, I just wanted you to know that the Indians would have done two things with schizophrenic Margaret. They would have either revered her as a shaman, you know, she's a person who sees things, and they would have taken that as we would consider a blessing, you know, and they would consider her, you know, a highly spiritual being, or they would have considered her, as they would have said, touched in the head. And if she's touched in the head, that would have been like a hands-off kind of thing. They probably wouldn't have messed with her at all, you know. They just would have said, she's touched in the head, we can't work with her, or and probably wouldn't even have killed her. They just would have walked away from her because she was touched in the head. But I always thought Margaret was the most interesting character for whatever reason. Maybe I'm just drawn to like the weird people, I don't know. But she struck me as being very interesting. So that takes care of The Heretic's Daughter, and we're moving into, after you finish the epistolary, the letters of John and Abigail Adams, we're then moving into fiction. And the advent of fiction is a very important thing because now the settlers are progressing into more established communities. They have more leisure time. Life isn't quite as difficult as it was in the beginning. So now we're dealing with a population of people who have leisure time. The printing press is up and active, so people actually have an opportunity to read and enjoy fiction. And we're reading a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe and Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown, where the writers are beginning to play with symbolism. And to us, it seems like really obvious symbolism, but to them, it would have been like, ooh, how cool is this? You know. We're also going to move into, very rapidly, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. When I first read Uncle Tom's Cabin, we had been reading a series of slave narratives, including the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. And when we got to Uncle Tom's Cabin, I was just like, ugh, I'm so tired of slave narratives. This is all so depressing and horrible. And I didn't think that I would enjoy it very much, but I have to tell you, I was hooked at the first chapter. It was really quite interesting. If you're reading the Townsend Press version, that I assigned for the class. You should find it, again, to be a very easy read, a very fast read, and a very interesting read. So I'm anxious to see what you think about Uncle Tom's Cabin. I really enjoyed it. Abraham Lincoln actually accredited Harriet Beecher Stowe and this particular book with causing the Civil War. So as she is, of course, a northern writer. She had never been on a slave plantation, although she had talked to former slaves. And that's where she got a lot of her information. And you will see many recurring themes as you read through the novel. Certain ideas about slavery keep coming up over and over again. And those are the things that she was really trying to convince people of the wrongs of slavery. So she emphasized some of the horrors of slavery over and over and over again for rhetorical effect. You know, it's meant to sink in as horrible and awful and something we should do away with. And she was very effective with that. At the time, this novel was extremely popular, and it still remains popular today. And of all the slave narratives, and I used to have this class read a number of them, of all the slave narratives, many of them written by slaves themselves, my students always chose Uncle Tom's Cabin as their favorite, which is why it's the one that you're reading now. I don't want to assign you guys something that students tend not to like. I want to assign the things that students tend to like very much. So Uncle Tom's Cabin is pretty popular with my students today, and it was pretty popular when it was written. So we do have other slave narratives. We do look at Phyllis Wheatley and Sojourner Truth a little bit. Phyllis Wheatley is another really interesting character. She was purchased when she was about 8 years old, having been kidnapped from Africa, but she was raised in the North, and that's very different than slaves in the South. She was raised in the North by a very wealthy family who treated her as their own daughter. And as such, she was educated, she was talented, she was valued by the family. She had a very different experience than slaves in the South. So even when she writes about her enslavement, which was hardly enslavement, she writes a poetry that says that she feels like she was lucky to have been kidnapped from Africa because she was exposed to Christianity and all that kind of thing. Well, you have to keep in mind she's in the North, and she is living a very different life than slaves in the South. And a lot of people hold her accountable for that in a very negative way. You know, they call her a sellout. They criticize her for not writing the truth about slavery. I think that's a little misguided, though. First of all, we have to remember she is a child, and it's not fair to hold a child responsible for the larger philosophical institution of slavery. You know what I mean? She was only writing about her own personal experience. So that's a charge against her that I don't fully support, because I just don't think that you can do that to someone whose experience is very limited and whose knowledge is although she was highly educated, her knowledge is limited about the kind of slavery that we tend to hear about. So that's interesting. And as we move through these slave narratives, again, we're going to be talking about a society that we think of as having been solely in the past, but I think it probably exists in the current times as well, just in a different form. In fact, the character, the protagonist, Ishmael in Moby Dick, asks the question, who ain't a slave? Who ain't a slave? Everybody, he argues, is a slave to something. And I think that's probably true, even in today's time period. Okay, as we move forward in the semester, I hope you enjoy the texts. Email me if you have any questions. Don't forget to go back and make up any zeros you may have for previous work. You can make them up at any time. So just don't fall too far behind. And as you can tell, we are doing things that ideally will become part of your term paper. You know, there's much that you did on your midterm exam that you can just slide right into your term paper. And that's my ideal, so that you're not starting a term paper next month from scratch. You've already got a lot of it written. You just didn't realize that that's what you were doing along the way. But that is what you're doing along the way. Okay, I will keep in touch with you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget about your study groups. Most of the people in the class are still active. There may have been a couple who have dropped off by the wayside, and that's fine. That's to be expected. But don't forget your study groups. Don't forget you have online tutors waiting to help you. The feedback that I've been getting this semester is very positive about the students' experience with the tutors. And don't forget to let me know if you have a question. I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.